Over the last week, chaos has erupted in the North Carolina Senate race between Senator Thom Tillis testing positive for COVID-19 and his opponent, Cal Cunningham, being investigated for an extramarital affair.
We've reached out to both candidates for interviews. News 13 Stephanie Santastasi joins us live now. And Stephanie, you spoke one-on-one with Senator Tillis today.
Yes, and we covered as much as we could in our allotted 10 minutes, from his opponent's affair to the upcoming Supreme Court nomination. But first, we focused on COVID-19. Days after U.S. Senator Thom Tillis tested positive for COVID-19, he shares with us how he's feeling.
Had some symptoms on Saturday morning. They dissipated by the afternoon, and I got my sense of taste back the day before yesterday, so I feel great.
The senator received a rapid test at Mission Hospital in Asheville last week, then headed to his home in Charlotte, where he's stayed since. Tillis is among several people who tested positive for the coronavirus days after attending the Supreme Court nomination ceremony for Amy Coney Barrett at the White House.
Do you regret going?
Well, first, I don't think that I was infected at the White House. I was around a number of people, a number of staff, I should say, after the event. And then subsequent to Wednesday, given that I showed my first symptoms on Saturday, we think it's more likely it occurred sometime during the week.
He did wear a mask during the Rose Garden announcement, but he went without one at a reception for Barrett inside the White House.
I let my guard down, and now I recognize even that's a mistake.
Earlier this week, President Trump was released from Walter Reed Medical Center after testing positive for the virus. In a tweet, he wrote, "Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life." However, Tillis believes the virus is real and people should take it seriously.
People need to understand that COVID has become so successful in infecting people because so many are asymptomatic. They exhibit no symptoms or mild symptoms.
Tillis says he's been in contact with the president this week.
I think the president is following his doctor's advice. I don't think they would have released him from Walter Reed unless they thought it was medically possible.
The president this week also asking senators to stop negotiating on COVID relief and instead focus on the Supreme Court nomination. Senator Tillis says the confirmation for Judge Barrett remains on schedule, but also wants Congress to continue working on another pandemic relief package going forward.
We can focus on the Barrett nomination and get the other work of the Senate done, and I intend to do both.
And of course, we also spoke with the senator today about the sex scandal making headlines with his opponent.
I think it's important for Mr. Cunningham to come before the people of North Carolina and give us a full explanation.
Now, coming up at 6, you'll hear more on what Senator Tillis had to say about that and how he believes it could impact this race.
Senator Tillis, so first just tell us, how are you feeling today?
I feel great. I was actually up in Asheville. I went to a Mission to get a rapid test after I heard that one of my colleagues had tested positive. I had a meeting for later that evening that I canceled. Then I came back on Saturday morning, got the PCR test, which is more extensive. They confirmed my diagnosis. Had some symptoms on Saturday morning. They dissipated by the afternoon, and I got my sense of taste back the day before yesterday. So I feel great.
And you've been at home the whole time?
I have. I've self-quarantined. My wife is upstairs. I'm downstairs, and I'll be here until the doctors release me from quarantine, probably the first part of next week.
That's good to hear. And knowing now that you've had it and kind of been experiencing those symptoms, what do you say to all those people out there who still don't think that this virus is real?
Well, I'm a classic case for the people I'm most concerned with. So I felt I had cold or flu-like symptoms Saturday morning. I cleared up. I mean, people need to understand that COVID has become so successful in infecting people because so many are asymptomatic. They exhibit no symptoms or mild symptoms. That's why wearing a mask, using hand sanitizer, washing your hands, and social distancing is important no matter how healthy you feel.
Looking back now, some have called this Amy Coney Barrett nomination announcement a super spreader event. Do you regret going?
Well, first, I don't think that I was infected at the White House. I was around a number of people, a number of staff, I should say, after the event. And then subsequent to Wednesday, given that I showed my first symptoms on Saturday, we think it's more likely it occurred sometime during the week. But I am pleased to report that all my staff that I was in very close contact with over the week have tested negative.
Were you wearing a mask at that event at the White House?
I wore a mask at the outside session. When we went inside in the reception room, I was in a room full of everyone who had tested negative 2 hours before. I let my guard down, and now I recognize even that's a mistake. When you think you're in the safest setting, you should always have your guard up. You should always wear a mask. I think in my case, that I was infected later in the week, but it's very possible that there were those in the White House who were affected at that time.
I understand that you have spoken to the president since, and how do you think his response, or do you feel his response has been appropriate since he's left Walter Reed? And how do you think that kind of his response comes across to all those families who have lost loved ones throughout these last 7 months?
Well, I think the president and all the elected leaders want to strike the balance. I've done 67, including today, my 67th telephone town hall to tell everybody to be vigilant. But I also want them to be optimistic about at some point getting back to some sense of normalcy. We have to understand that there are a lot of people who have become victims of COVID who've never been infected with the virus. The social isolation, the calls to crisis suicide hotlines, drug abuse, child abuse, domestic violence are on the rise. So I think that, we always have to be very, very focused on protecting people from the virus, but also understand there are a lot of other people being victimized by the isolation, the forced shutdowns, the other things that we're going through. I think the president is following his doctor's advice. I don't think they would have released him from Walter Reed unless they thought it was medically possible. I actually haven't been under a doctor's care in person. I've been on the phone since I first got my test result, and I'm following my doctor's advice. I expect the president's doing the same.
Speaking of the president, yesterday he asked Congress to focus on the nomination instead of passing a second stimulus bill. What do you think about that? And Senator, don't you think you can do both?
I absolutely think we can do both, and I absolutely believe that we are. I've had discussions today with colleagues on continuing to negotiate to get a package out that provides paycheck protection, extension of unemployment, funding for schools, funding for vaccines, and things that are very, very important to people in North Carolina. Out in your neck of the woods, a lot of first in, last out businesses are suffering, fine dining, travel and tourism, hotels. So we can do both, and we will do both. I'm working on other bills that have nothing to do with COVID at the same time that we're trying to negotiate the deal with the Speaker of the House. We can focus on the Barrett nomination and get the other work of the Senate done, and I intend to do both.
Speaking of the nomination, will the Judiciary Committee begin its hearings on Judge Barrett next week?
They will, and I'll most likely dial in for the opening on Monday, the 12th. There will be opening comments. I will do what I've done several times and several members on the Democratic side have done for judicial nominations since we've had hybrid hearings. And then if I get cleared, then I'll be getting in my pickup truck and driving to D.C., and I'll be there in person for the remainder of the hearings.
Shifting now to the headlines over your opponent, Cal Cunningham, that he's made in recent days. It's come out now that it's more than just text messages, that there's been confirmation of an affair, and that now the Army Reserves is investigating him. How do you think this is going to impact the race?
Well, I think at its core, Cal Cunningham and your listening area is running ads that says the truth matters. I think the truth still matters. I think it's important for Mr. Cunningham to come before the people of North Carolina and give us a full explanation. He gave a brief response on Friday night, then he's canceled campaign events. He's refused to meet with the media, and I think that he owes us all a complete and thorough explanation. I think the truth does matter, and I think that Cal Cunningham should come forward and explain it. At the same time, I do believe that we should respect his wife and his children's and his family's privacy. This is about somebody running for the Senate who should be fully transparent, and he's been less than transparent in my measure, in my opinion. And I think he can do himself a great service by coming before the people of North Carolina and explaining, giving us a full explanation.
And Senator, my last question, in the past, we've seen and heard of different sex scandals on both sides of the ticket. Why do you believe this one's different, and why should North Carolinians take this one seriously?
Well, this race is about Thom Tillis and Cal Cunningham. And the allegations are about something that occurred over the course of this campaign. And now I hear just as recently as today that the Army Reserve is investigating whether or not there was a violation of the Code of Conduct. This isn't something that happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago. This is something that happened days or weeks ago. That's why I think it's relevant, and that's why I think Cal Cunningham owes us all an explanation.